My name is Prabhu, and I'm from India originally. And the background to my question is that in India, certainly, the growth among followers of Jesus has been almost entirely outside the denominations, the established denominations. So obviously, some is taking place in the established denomination, but most of the growth has been completely outside the churches. And I'm wondering whether your report doesn't ignore the growth of people who follow Jesus from within Islam and who follow Jesus from within Judaism, because there's been a rise in Messianic Judaism. At the time of the establishment of Israel, there was probably hardly any Messianic Jew. Today, of course, there are, I don't know, tens of thousands of people who are Messianic Jews. Similarly, among Muslims, even in this city, London, there are thousands of Muslims who follow Jesus but are not Christians. So I wonder whether you have taken this new phenomenon into account in your thinking and in your report. Thank you.
We've agreed that George will get all the difficult questions. So. Well, I mean, if
you could stand up so that we can.
So yeah, no. Thanks for that question. I think if I make a very brief comment, and I think George, because he's done a lot of anthropological work, in situ comments. The last time I was in Israel, I was running a leadership program with the University of Haifa, and we had people there from all of the major communities, including those that don't believe, and some who were Messianic Jews, but also varieties of Muslim and different parts of the Jewish community, because that's incredibly diverse as well. And I think in a short exploratory report, to have gone into the diversity of the Jewish community, the diversity of the Muslim community, the diversity of the Christian community, that would have been kind of like the first 80 pages in definitions. So I think we were trying to kind of like a snapshot of the contribution and the risks. But you know, I hear what you're saying. I recently spent some time with some Christian women and some Muslim women who were together because Mary was the only woman mentioned in the Holy Quran, and they were having this amazing conversation about empowerment through the thing of Mary. So I think there's lots and lots of scope for fresh conversations. But I think if we'd gone there, we'd still be arguing about what kind of Messianic Jew from which part of America counts as a real one in Israel right now, before you get to all of the others, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's a very good question, actually. Certainly there's a lot of contribution coming from communities you mentioned. In the report for the economic contribution, we picked 25 Christian organizations, but there's so many more, and also from Messianic Jewish background. With regards to followers of Christianity, outside Christianity, just to build on Francis' point, it would require a lot of research to actually gather data and trace that contribution. But yeah, why not? That's certainly something that can be done in the future.
Thank you. Next question? Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Sebastian about tablets. So, you know, I've heard a lot of religious persecution stories, especially persecution of Christians in the Middle East and elsewhere. One of the main problems we encounter in this area, as I'm sure you already know, is that it's very hard to persuade secular politicians that this issue matters, and even when they say it does, action rarely follows, it rarely gets pushed into policy. So my question is, if I'm, writing an article, I'm talking to an MP who isn't already invested in this issue, why does it matter to them? Why do they care? Why does it matter to their constituents and to the general public? Thank you.
You both go. So, thanks very much. I'm very honoured and pleased that Archbishop Angelos is there, because I've just finished developing the Foreign Office's religious training around their professional leadership needs, and been supported by one of your advisors, Evelina Ochab, in that experience. And what we've tried to do is to shift the conversation from, you must all understand the intensity of what every community believes, to, hey guys, you used in the Foreign Office not to train anybody in economics because you didn't think anybody in the Foreign Office needed to know about economics. But there's a new professional competence that you need to get your head around in the emerging world of today, where religion is growing, and that's called religion, faith, religiosity. And so I think my argument to a policymaker would be, you're committed to human rights right? And they go, yes. Well, do you know what? Freedom of religion belief, Article 18, is one of the human rights that's written in the Universal Declaration. Getting your head around it is just basically a professional competence for a policymaker now, not an add-on like economics used to be in parts of the diplomatic service.
I think
It would be good if you could stand there so that we can. Thank you.
I think you're very right that many policymakers don't look at this, but because of everything that's been done, it can no longer be ignored. Even if it doesn't want to be addressed, it cannot be ignored. And the more we speak about it, the more we address it, the more it comes up. And the Bishop of Truro's review was very clear, and especially all of our approaches towards Christian persecution and the phenomenon, as my office is trying to point out, is actually founded on the idea of freedom of religion or belief for all. Because as Christians, we don't just want our rights, we want rights for anyone, and being advocates. So I think you're very, very right, and it's a slow uphill climb, but it can no longer be ignored.
Yeah, just to add, thank you, Your Eminence. The Christians in the Holy Land have been entrusted with protecting the holy sites. Now, these Christians there are linked to 2.5 billion Christians across the world. So the local in Jerusalem is in connection with the global around the world. Besides that, if that Christian community declines and Christians leave the Holy Land, the positive contribution we have identified is going to go, and with it, it will affect the other communities, religious communities and ethnic communities in the area. So it's in the benefit of everyone to actually support the Christian community. Thank you.
Yes, Julia, go ahead.
Julia Bicknell, World Watch Monitor and ex-BBC. I'm going to be devil's advocate, like my colleague from the tablet, because I think these are difficult questions for the general public. The perception, which I saw again quite recently on a documentary, is that the churches in the Holy Land do not actually get on with each other to such an extent that an Arab family keeps the key to, I believe, the church. That is reality. That's what many of our colleagues...
Sounds like Christians all over the world.
So what assurance can you give us that the churches themselves are actually getting on better than they used to several hundred years ago?
Thank you for this question. Isn't it the proof that Christians remain in this place for 2,000 years now? They have actually managed to coexist in a very confined space called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre since forever. I would say that's a really important argument to start with. But also, like Your Eminence mentioned earlier, the realities in the Middle East push the Christian communities to collaborate in order to survive, in order to maintain their collective standing. So this is basically not true anymore. I mean, there are disagreements, and it's actually something that I'm talking about in my research, because I spend a lot of time in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, for example, where different Christians interact. They don't argue because of theological differences. They don't argue because of historical stuff. They argue, it's a family, very much, people see them as family arguments. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and Julia, maybe also one example of their cooperation is ICoHS, since we have the mandate from the 13 official churches of Jerusalem. And this gathering here is one of the proofs of wanting to work together and wanting to get this message across. So thank you for being here and exemplifying that there is hope and that there is collaboration indeed. And this is a very practical expression of that collaboration. Last question.
Anita, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, yes.
No problem.
Okay.
Sorry, I think it's a good gathering here, and this message is very important to come out. Sorry, my name is Nadim Mograbi, I'm the trustee of ICoHS. But more importantly, or more specifically, I've worked with the churches in Jerusalem for 18 years plus. And what you see in the last 10 years, actually, this is a very good question, thank you very much for that. because for a long time we suffered from this label that the churches were bickering with each other and they were just fighting about who moved the ladder and who moves the icon from one, wall to another, who cleans the wall and who dusts the ceiling. I lived those for over 18 years. And there's a status quo committee that is between the Armenians, the Orthodox, and the Roman Catholics, of course, represented by the custody, which is the Franciscan. And they deal with all of these, petty issues, if you want. Of course, the lineage to that is a lot more important, and I understand the historical facts and the status quo and the doctrines and so on. But more recently, in the last 10 to 15 years, you see a lot of collaboration between the churches. And mainly, as was said over here, it's because of the challenges that they're facing. So they are working together. A big testament is what you see in the renovation of the Holy Sepulchre. For 200 years, they were not able to agree on who renovates and who does it, and they have agreed now. There's two major works that have been undertaken. The edifice was done by the Orthodox, and that was supported by the three communities, of course, and the other communities. The underground now sewage is being done by the Roman Catholics, and that again has the support of all and agreement of all the other denominations. You see it in the challenges that we face, whether it was the municipal taxes that were supposed to be, or that were proposed by the municipality there, or the law of confiscation of church properties that was proposed by some politicians on the extreme right for political gains, really like that. So you do see the challenges having made a conduit for the Christian communities and the churches, the 13 denominations. You see the council today, both in Jordan and in Israel and Palestinian Territory, the Council of Heads of Churches, very active. They're all attending the meetings, they're all actually interacting with the council. So in reality, over the 10 years that have passed, you see a lot of collaboration, a lot of agreement, and a lot of working together with the church, between the churches. Sorry, I thought this is very important.
Thank you, Dan.
And can I just say that was an Italian Franciscan beamed into Brexit Britain as well. So.
Last question before we. Yes, Robert, you get to ask the questions.
Well, it's not so much a question, it's just a concern in response to the point that was made by our colleague from the tablet. The challenge of communicating vision of ICoHS, does it not need to be seen in the wider context in the West of a developing hostility to all religions? And if so, what one tag could be developed as a kind of counter from the ICoHS point of view to the developing anti-religiousness of the West? And I wonder if the development of a tag such as Christophobia might not be a good one. So, in addition to advocacy and awareness and action, one of the things, if ICoHS could put forward, would be that it is fighting against Christophobia by raising finances and support and so on for the churches of the Middle East. Might be something worth thinking about. Just as Islamophobia has kind of focused attention on that, and Semitism and anti-Semitism has focused attention on that, perhaps Christophobia might focus attention on this.
Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you for that question. I think that maybe needs exploring, but I think one needs to look really closely at the data and the geographies, and the Pew Trust research in this space is really important, because it's harder or as hard to be a secular humanist in Indonesia as it is to be a Jew in the wrong parts of Portsmouth today, and it's as hard to be, or harder to be, a Uyghur as it is to be a Christian in Nigeria. So I think we just be really, really careful, because when the Christians go down, we need everyone to come for the Christians, and when the humanists go down, we need everyone to come in defence of the humanists, and that solidarity is the crucial bit. So the right is the important thing to defend, the right to freedom of religion and belief, and we all need to be on that side, as opposed to kind of fighting our own corners, or we'll end up in a pickle somewhere between the lot, if that makes sense. So,
perhaps I could just say one brief extra word before we break. one of the things you will have noticed about this research is that it points to the positive contribution made by the Christian communities in the Holy Land. There could have been a report about the positive contribution of Jews or Muslims or many other groups. And it's very easy to point the finger at the other. And in relation to the question about the churches not getting on, or there is also always the mirror into which we can look at our own behaviours. And I commend to you the positive spirit of the research that was done, underlining positive contribution. Because that, and as Archbishop Angelos also pointed out, we Christians are called to love each other, yes, but we're also called to love the other. We're called to love everybody who bears the imprint and is a reflection of the God who created us, as you, Archbishop Angelos, your eminence, said so much more eloquently. So let's not dwell on all those negatives that so quickly come to mind. Let's dwell on the positives, because actually that's what our sisters and brothers in the Holy Land exemplify every single day of the week. They really, really do. And we haven't been asked, Babu, by our brothers, the heads of churches, to talk about Christianophobia. Maybe there will be opportunities and times when that's the appropriate thing to do. We've been asked to talk about why supporting their work, the lives of the living stones in the Holy Land, is something of immense importance and will for sure contribute to their flourishing and their sustaining. So I hope that you will feel that this morning you've heard something. Many of you don't really need to be, as it were, converted to this cause. You're already part of this cause, and I want to acknowledge that. And it's a particular pleasure, actually, that amongst us are MPs, parliamentarians, and those who work for parliamentarians. And I want to thank you for coming and taking time out of your very busy lives. So, Laura, last word will go to Laura, and then we will break for refreshments. And please do stay, and the refreshments are back. But I'm really pleased. Laura, come up and you have the last word.
I don't want to take everyone's time, but I suspect I'm the only Jew in the room, and I just was very, very taken with what I heard this morning. I was very taken by the positivity of it. I think many people are in the same boat in that we want to support the role of the Christians, the contributions of the Christians in the Holy Land. And I just wanted to say that as somebody Jewish, I'm very much relating to my Judaism. I really applaud what you're doing and want to contribute to your work and want to support it. So that's what I wanted to say. It was a big thank you, and it's a collective effort. So.
Thank you, Laura.